Hi, and welcome to Kavita TV. Today we have a very special guest with me. We have Esther Perel. Do you want to say hi really quickly, Esther?
Yes. Hi, Kavita. Hello, everyone.
Hi. I am so delighted and excited to be talking to her today. So let me introduce her before we dive into the real juice of today's conversation. Esther Perel is a psychologist and first earned recognition in 2006 when she published her book, Mating in Captivity, Unlocking Erotic Intelligence, which explored how to sustain desire in a long-term relationship. Almost a decade later, her profile was raised even again with her infamous TED Talk, which has been viewed by over 10 million people. She's had two TED Talks, which I think together has been 18 million people, where she discussed infidelity, and discussed how it doesn't necessarily mean the end of a relationship and that sometimes it can actually even improve it, something we will be talking about today. Esther, who speaks 9 languages, now travels the world, delivering speeches on relationships and sex, while also offering couples access to her counsel through workshops in New York, where she's based, has now come out with a second book, State of Affairs, Rethinking Infidelity, which is what we're talking about today. She also has an amazing podcast that I've been listening to over the last week or so called Where Should We Begin with Esther Perel. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So both actually, Where Should We Begin and The State of Affairs are being released today and tomorrow.
Yeah, literally today. And I'm so thrilled to be celebrating that with you because I know a book is absolutely a labor of love.
Yes.
So we're talking about infidelity today, rethinking infidelity. And, this is an edgy topic, which is obvious. And I just love, through reading the beginning of your book, even, I just love the fresh conversation that you're creating around it and a new perspective, which is one that isn't so black and white and isn't trying to bucket affairs, infidelity, cheating into one category, which is where most of us have it, which is bad, wrong, not okay. And that's why I'm really excited to talk to you today because I wanted to just read this one really quick excerpt in the book. So let me find that. Okay, so you say, whenever I tell someone I'm writing a book about infidelity, the immediate reaction is usually, are you for or against? As if there were only 2 options. My answer is yes. So can you explain that? Your answer being yes?
So, Kavita, when I'm asked if I'm for or against, for a topic that is as complex and as sensitive and as painful as infidelity can be, it doesn't even begin to capture it. I mean, here is this experience that can be most shattering to couples. And it implies deception, lies, a breach of trust, betrayal, jealousy, rejection on the side of the person who is experiencing it, on the side of the person who is actually going elsewhere. What may be at stake? Frustration, loneliness, all kinds of things that have to do with the relationship and with not with the relationship. I don't think you can capture the dilemmas of love and desire like that in black and white, in good and bad, in victim and perpetrator terms. Too many people are affected by this experience to not develop an approach that is more nuanced and more compassionate and more empathic toward the people who are going through this. So that's why I say yes, meaning come in and let's have a conversation and let's think about this very differently. That doesn't mean it's justifying it. That doesn't mean I condone it. But I think it is way too common to not understand it better and then help people better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, that's why I really wanted to talk with you today because you're changing the conversation around it in a healthy way. And so, when somebody, story after story I read in the State of Affairs of all the different perspectives that you can kind of look at this from and the different ways that people are experiencing cheating, betrayal, affairs. And so, this is kind of a big question, but where do you start with either a couple or a person when they have gone through something like this, like a betrayal of some sort? Where do you even just begin?
With the pain. With the pain. And with the unique pain point for that person. You start from the place a person is at. What hurts? Is it because you've been hurt before? Is it because it's your best friend? Is it because you were asking for months and you kept being lied to? Is it because you never even wanted to be in this relationship in the first place and the other person convinced you that you were the one, to just realize a few months later that there may be many other ones? Where is the unique pain point? Where does the knife really twist? I think that that's the place you start. Because from there, you first have to give people a sense that they will manage this pain. They will be able to absorb it, and that it won't destroy their whole sense of self. That they can still trust themselves, even if they don't trust this particular person. That they can still allow themselves to be loved, even if this person didn't love them. That they can still trust someone, even if this person deceived them all the time. And that's where you start. You start in where it cuts.
Yeah, because I think that when you make it about their pain, it suddenly starts to give them some control back. Is that how you would put it? Or it allows them to actually access what's deeply within them versus it being a very external conversation typically, right? Like he's to blame or she's to blame or...
Look, heartbreak hurts. Heartbreak is painful, has always been massively painful. Emotional pain is physical pain. But that doesn't mean you have to be devalued completely. Because when you are cheated on, betrayed, abandoned for someone else, you feel devalued. You feel like you don't matter.
Yeah.
And the first thing that needs to happen is that you have to get your sense of meaning back. That, yes, you may not matter to this person, but you certainly matter to a hell of a lot of other people. And from that place, you gain your strength. And with that strength, you learn to gradually overcome the rejection, the betrayal, whatever just happened to you. That takes time. This is not, but when you ask me on an individual basis, if a person comes to me, I've been dating this woman for the last year and a half. I thought we were really going somewhere. Or I've been dating this guy or this other woman, 2 women, doesn't matter. And I really thought this time I had it. And wow, if I could be so wrong, if I can be so mistaken, what does that say about me? And then the first thing I'm just trying to say is, no, what does it say about the other person? Why? Because the first thing we will do often is question ourselves.
Yeah.
So we self-blame. And neither blame is going to work here. What you want is, and my job is to bring calmness, reassurance, equanimity, hope, that we work through these experiences. So that's where I start when a person comes to me and says, "I."
Yeah, and the resiliency and the equanimity that you're bringing to the conversation is what I'm really interested in. And so how do we take something that feels such like a sense of mistrust, a sense of pain on many different levels. And we start with the pain, is what you said, and then start to work through that to then come to some resolution. Because for most people, the answer that I hear all the time, even in my work, is it's over, it's done, I'm out. Or they're being told by friends and family,
get out,
or how dare you stay. And there's absolutely more room than that for a developed conversation, and to your point, compassion and understanding and empathizing. So how do you move them from that dialogue that they're probably surrounded by, mm-hmm. or even having within themselves, into something greater?
So to me, it's a sequence, right? The first thing is you hurt. For me to know if there is a chance for you and your partner to stay together, to work this thing through, I need to have a sense of how your partner is approaching the fact that they hurt you. Even if they have all kinds of good explanations for why they did what they did. When you hurt somebody, you need to be able to show guilt and remorse for hurting them. If you keep trying to justify, if you keep sending it back and say, yes, but that's because you know, I wouldn't have done this if you, no, then we can't even begin the conversation. From that place, after your pain is touched, comes the level of, I go from crisis to insight to vision. So insight is, now let me try to understand, why did this happen? Does this have anything to do with us? Is this have nothing to do with us? And this is your own issues or your own longings or your own, what happened here? Or your own, missed opportunities that you're still hoping to deal with, because you didn't have your chances when you were a teenager kind of thing. What's happening here? I need to get a sense to what extent does this have to do with me, with us, or just with you. That already begins to clarify it for me. Because I don't want to have to take responsibilities that I don't have, but I should take responsibilities for the things that are mine. And then from there, what do we learn from this? Does this make us? Does this remake us? Or does this break us? Basically, can we draw something from here that actually we may even become more honest than we have been till we were now? Because till we were now, we were kind of footsie-putzing around each other and we were never really telling each other the truth. And this has propelled us into a whole different level of truth. Or is the series of lies that is being uncovered here too big for me? And, I don't know that I can forget this. So this takes a moment. When we only say to people, get out, because once a cheater, always a cheater. That is true for some people, but that is absolutely not the case for most people. So you want to not throw away a relationship that was good, that is in the formation, and that needs to work through this experience, which many times you will listen later on, people will say, in the beginning, we had a couple of affairs and they really strengthened us. They gave us a sense of what really was at stake here. And we became much more careful about this and that. And when you look at it 5 years later, you kind of say, would we recommend this? No, never. Did we need to go through this in order to get to a better place? We wish we didn't have to, but it actually did. And often the reaction is so in the moment, get out. That person is a bad person. That person will do this again for you forever. And of course, the most difficult thing is to know which one is which. And that, it takes knowing the person you're with, knowing yourself, knowing the relationship to know, what, this is not the first time. This has been going on and on and on, and I'm just trying to make excuses for my partner, and I'm trying to be compassionate with my partner, but my partner doesn't seem to be thinking about me one bit. This is not viable. Versus, we've been together for 3, 4, 10 years. This thing has been really good, and this happened. Let's figure out what went on here. This will not be our only crisis. We may have others.
Yeah, and so you did just mention that for most people, it's not the case of, get out, leave. And is that what you've seen through your work, is that most couples or individuals are able to kind of come back together and rebuild in a more powerful way?
Look, Kavita, it's both ends. We know that infidelity is the leading cause of divorce at this point. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it caused it. That may mean that maybe many people were finally waiting for the opportunity to leave. Yeah. Or for the opportunity to say to the other person, you did this to me, now I can finally leave. So it has become the justifying reason for ending many relationships. You understand? Mm-hmm. That said, if a person is a chronic philanderer and they have narcissistic issues, this is one of the many features of their narcissism. There would be many other reasons I would want to not live with a narcissist. This is one of them. I need a person who I can relate to, who can be there with me. The majority of people may not necessarily be narcissistic. They are people who, for all kinds of reasons, are breaking the rule. They're straying, they're cheating, they're longing for something. and they have often been quite faithful and monogamous for years before. That's the difference. The difference is between those for whom seems to happen all the time, and every time they're alone, every time I'm out of town, and every time they're out of town, and every time, I find someone else they've reconnected with on Facebook, and it's just like an endless string. That's a very different experience from we have been together for a few years or more years, and I find that, and here I discover something, or you come and you tell me that 3 years ago you did this, and I'm like, okay, and what am I supposed to do with this now? Because we don't always find out in the moment. Sometimes it's told to us a few years later.
Yeah, and so I'm going to kind of go back to a little bit of the beginning, because in the book you also talk about how do you define cheating, right? And that there is such a wide definition of that. So how do couples maybe even, or individuals, start to have a dialogue around this topic so that they're on the same page, and or continue the conversation over time, because it can be something that changes and shifts over the years. Yeah.
How would you feel if there was an infidelity? Have you had infidelity in your family growing up? What was it like? What was the experience for all the people involved? If you ask people, if they've experienced infidelity in their lives, in every audience I speak to, I would say almost 80% of the people raise their hand. Has a friend of you ever gone through this? Have you, what has informed you, about this experience? Let's talk about that. How do we relate to our exes? Do we talk about them? Do we pretend they never existed? What do we tell each other about them? What do we tell each other about thoughts, fantasies we may have about others, desires that exist for other people? Do we acknowledge that they exist? Not that we act on them, but that they exist. And do we feel free to talk about them so that we actually don't feel like we have to deny them and then repress them and then hide them, and then it becomes, from privacy, it becomes secrecy, right? So it's those conversations that people want to have. What's your definition of monogamy? In the past, you knew what an infidelity was. It meant that out of me will come a red-haired child, which I'm not, and that was a clear proof. Today, the lines are much more blurry, and the digital has brought us multiple new opportunities for sex online that isn't physical. That's the other thing. So is it porn? Is it chat rooms? Is it massages with happy endings? Is it fantasies? Is it reconnecting with your exes on Facebook? Is it staying active on your dating apps while you're already seeing somebody? And that definition seems to extend all the time. And couples need to have that conversation. Where do we draw the lines? What are our lines? There is no institution up there these days that tell you what the lines are. So it is up to us to have a conversation. And we should have the conversation before there is a crisis rather than after. If you ask me about what makes up an infidelity, what makes up an affair, I would say it is a combination of these three elements. Secrecy, because that's the essence of an affair. If it's not a secret, we're in a different arrangement with each other. And a certain emotional involvement to one degree or another with somebody. Even if you say it means nothing, it takes a lot of emotions to make something mean nothing. And a sexual alchemy. And the word alchemy is what matters. And nothing happened. We didn't have sex. It's like we're going back to Clinton. I didn't have sex with this woman. What is sex? So we understand alchemy. We know when there is a relationship that has a sexual energy to it, and when there's a relationship that has none of that. So those three elements are the constitutive elements of affairs or infidelities to one degree or another. What each couple will define as an infidelity, that is for each couple to talk about. I can give the guidelines. I give many of the guidelines in the book. But this today is our own lines that we draw. That is one of the fundamental things that have changed.
Yeah, and I think that's such a key piece, because so many couples are not having this level of honest conversation in the relationship. It's almost like there's such a fear around approaching or approaching that conversation. So how do you help them even just start this conversation? Because, what would help them motivate them? Because I feel that so many couples are avoiding.
The same way that we taught people to talk about if they are taking contraceptives, the same way we taught people to talk about condoms, that we taught people to talk about STIs, HIV. I mean, we have taught people, if you want to be promiscuous, if you want to have free sex, you need to be able to negotiate with your partners about your protection. Otherwise, you don't do it, because you're going to have risks and consequences. It's the same here. You come together and you start the difficult conversations. That is, it sounds strange because we just met, we're all in love, but you know what? We should be talking about this. It's the same way as people talk sometimes, do you want to have children? And somebody says, no, I have no intention to have children. You better know that in the beginning.
Yeah.
So these are difficult conversations, and they often feel harder to do from a place of puppy-eyed. But in fact, that's when they need to happen. And they need to be normalized. Because what happens is, how can we talk about this when we just fell in love? That must mean that you not really love me, or you wouldn't be talking about this. No, it means that because I respect you and I love you, we can have difficult conversations together.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really encourage everybody to pick up the book, The State of Affairs, Rethinking Infidelity. And why this book at this time as my last question?
Because I have worked with so many hundreds, thousands of people who have been shattered by this experience. And I thought we can do better, because I think that it is so prevalent in the lives of so many people. I think we need a new conversation about it, because I believe in the resiliency of couples. And I think that you learn from looking at when things go wrong. If you want to understand fidelity, look at betrayal. If you want to understand trust, look at infidelity. It gives you the sense of what you actually need to do. This is not a book for if you've experienced infidelity. This is a book for if you want a strong relationship.
Thank you so much. And please go out and buy The State of Affairs. So thank you for being here,
Thank
Esther.
you. Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.